Hello and welcome to the Soulful Mamas podcast. You're with your host Maria and I am so glad you're here. Welcome. Well, today's episode, everyone, you're probably going to need tissues, and you're probably going to need maybe a cuppa or some kind of beverage. It's a biggie. It's a biggie. And I certainly needed both of those things recording it. And I know this story. I know this journey really, really well, because this is the story of my brother and his family. So this is my sister-in-law, Nadia, sharing the journey. So in a real nutshell, imagine in 1 year getting married, and then in that same year your mother being diagnosed with cancer, and within a very short time losing your mother to cancer, and then at the end of that same year your child, your firstborn, being diagnosed with a ultra rare disease with no cure. It's massive. That's just 1 year. And then from then, the journey that they have had navigating grief and loss and pain and absolute devastation, and watching their little girl have to go through multiple surgeries and endure so much suffering as her body deteriorates. And then in amongst it, your husband, my brother, having 2 near-death experiences. One Nadia shares, the other one, it's another day, another story, because this little family, this beautiful family, have gone through so much in their short time. And it's pretty incredible that they keep smiling and keep moving and keep on progressing forward, and that's what you do. So when you listen to Nadia, she's just accepted what is, and she embraces it, and she's just doing what she can to do the best for her daughter, her family, and it's so normalised now what they have to go through on a day-to-day basis that when you hear her, it's just like any other normal day. But for the rest of us listening to it, even trying to comprehend what it must be like, you can't actually comprehend it at all. So anyway, sit back, listen, have that cup of something ready, and if you need to shed a wee tear, then that's what you do. It's all about awareness, this episode, and I hope you enjoy. Okay. Nadia, welcome to the Soulful Mamas podcast.
Thanks, Mark. It's an honour to be here.
Oh, it's so good. So good to have you here. This is a conversation that I thought we'd probably have a bit later, but we're having it now, and I'm really excited. So you are so welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, do you want to tell everyone a little bit about who you are and your entry into motherhood?
Yep. So I guess it all started a good 20 years ago now when I met your brother. So yeah, my soulmate, my high school sweetheart, Daniel. And gosh, we'll be coming up 6 years married in a couple of weeks. Wow. So our journey began way back when, and I guess by the time I was 24, our group of friends in our small town, I guess it was around that time when people started having their families, or that were quite young, and I guess we sort of moved into that space as well naturally. It seemed like we'd been together for ages by that point. I think it'd
Yeah.
been about 8 years. So I think we were ready to start our family then. And that was when it was actually the year of the dragon, which we are in now.
We are,
So
yes.
I always had a little inkling that I'd have a wee dragon of my own because I'm also a dragon. But yeah, so
We're a family of dragons. I'm a
yeah,
dragon. Maya's
the
a
house,
dragon.
yep, the House of
Dad's a
Dragon.
dragon.
Um, yeah, so that was back in 2012, and yeah, it was an unremarkable pregnancy, really. It was textbook, like everything went, to the T. Like it was just, um, yeah, pretty average pregnancy. And up until the end though, and that was when I started to notice things change. I got like preeclampsia,
Hmm.
and so the yeah, I think I worked right up till 37 weeks, and then I had her at like 37 weeks and 4 days. So
Yeah.
yeah, and yeah, I was in a bit of a shock because I didn't expect her to arrive so early. Um, Actually, I feel like it was just before 37 weeks. Sorry, 3 kids later,
Yeah.
I'm getting now,
Totally.
I'm now,
No
I'm getting
sleep.
all
Yeah.
these frames mixed up. I feel like she was actually 36 weeks and some, but anyway, she was a bit early. Um, but that's okay because um, she ended up being a good size. Like she was 7 pound 3 from memory. So pretty decent for a early-ish bub. Um, and yeah, it was quite an intensive labor. So we'd actually been out at a party the night before, as you do when you're young. I think it was a Guy Fawkes get together with a group of friends. So we're in our hometown of Palmerston North in little old New Zealand. And we'd gotten home at midnight that night, and tucked up, ready to go to sleep. And then only about 3 hours later, I had the pains,
Hmm.
and um, I thought it was like food poisoning. I was like, oh no, I had some barbecue sausages. Maybe they weren't cooked properly. Like, oh no, I've got food poisoning. And Dan was just, couldn't. He was just completely out to it, snoring away. And I just thought, oh, this isn't good. Maybe I should text my mum. And it was handy having my mum around at that time because she would work night shifts, so she was always awake in the middle of the night. Um, and yeah, and I just messaged my mum. I remember saying like, "Look, mum, I'm really crook. I think I've had something bad to eat." And she was like, Nads, I think you're in labor. So I was like, no, I can't be. It's too soon. I don't even know if I had my hospital bag packed or anything. I don't think I did. I wasn't too prepared back then. Um, and so yeah,
Yeah, I was the same.
I just kind of went with it. And I think maybe an hour or two later, I was like, look, Dan, you need to wake up. Like I'm having a baby. And then at first he was like, huh, and went back to sleep. And then he was like, huh, like he got the shock, like it wasn't a
Yeah.
dream. Um, and it basically went from there. It was really agonizing because Kiara was actually back to back during that labor.
Mm.
So I was in excruciating pain, but obviously I had nothing to compare it to. So I just thought that's what giving birth was like. And my lovely mum popped over a few hours later, and she was giving me this amazing like back rub, because she knew like where I needed it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and actually, I was on the phone obviously to my midwife throughout this time, and she ended up saying like, oh, okay, it's about time you came in. And, I'd labored all morning at home. And by the time I got to the hospital, uh, it was in the afternoon, and it was really intense. And I ended up I wanted a water birth. And the symbolism behind that was it was all natural, and I just felt like I needed that as my first like initiation into motherhood. I felt like I had to handle that
Mm.
pain and just give birth in the water. And because that was the year of the water dragon, I just felt like it was
Mhm.
appropriate for Kiarah's entry. And that's what ended up happening. It was really amazing. Dan actually caught her in the bath. And my mum was there, and it was really lovely. And the only scary part at the time was that my midwife wasn't available. So I had a student midwife step in, and I'd only met her maybe once before at a previous appointment.
Mm.
So I was quite nervous, thinking, "Oh no, I don't have my familiar midwife that I've been seeing for the last 9 months. It's almost like a stranger to me, helping deliver this child." And actually, it worked out. She was amazing, and I was actually the last practical study, I guess you could say, that she needed to be qualified.
Okay.
So, so in a roundabout way, it all worked out because she ended up delivering my last child.
Oh,
A good,
wow.
what was that, 10 years later? Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
That's
So,
awesome.
that was a really cool little thing that happened. And yeah, so that was Kiara's birth basically, and she was this little cutie. And I remember thinking, like, what are we going to call her? And I have had this happen with each of my children, that we think of a name, and then it's not until we see them and then we're like,
Hmm.
actually, they don't quite suit that name. And
Hmm.
we pull another one out of the thin air, and it's like, oh, where did that name come from? Perhaps they chose
Yeah, yeah.
it. Yeah. So,
That's
um,
true for each of your children, isn't it?
yeah,
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 it's like they've named themselves. Actually, no, there's another one. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, that was always funny. And yeah, so that was our entry into motherhood. Um, and she was actually, now that I can look back, she was probably the easiest baby out of all three, despite feeling at the time like this is too much for me, what's going on.
Mhm.
She did have quite bad reflux, but they all have. um, Mind you, Layla wasn't as bad, but yeah, so we had Layla 3 years later. And actually her pregnancy and birth were the complete opposite experience.
Mm.
So it wasn't until I had my second child that I realized, actually, I endured a lot with Kiarah, but I just didn't know any different.
Yeah.
And that applied to not only the pregnancy, but breastfeeding, and the postpartum. Like, I didn't even realize what a fourth trimester was back then. I just, it
Mm.
didn't really occur to me that that was an important part of the process. Um,
Isn't
but
it
yeah,
interesting, even today, that it's still the forgotten trimester, and it's the
yeah,
most important one, really.
yeah,
Uh, there's so many people have this exact same story of, yeah, then you just got to try and muddle your way through it. I guess maybe partly it's to do with the fact it's different for every child. So there's no one way, one size fits all. But
yeah,
yeah, yeah. It's,
totally. But yeah, it wasn't until Layla came along that I realized that things weren't quite the same for Kia.
mm,
So that was when I think I always had like an intuition about there potentially being something different about her. But I guess being a first time mum and being wrapped up in that bubble of like joy and happiness, you don't necessarily look into things as, you don't necessarily look for the things that could be at fault with it, with your child,
mm,
in a
hmm,
sense. Yeah. So
yeah.
it wasn't until Layla started developing that I realized a lot of milestones that Kiarah had reached actually had taken a lot longer than Layla did, for example.
Mm.
And so, yeah, it was actually a blessing to have had them both within, with only like a 3-year age gap. Yeah. So, yeah, do we segue into
Yeah,
this?
also the intuition that you're talking about, that because we each have it and it's often very, very strong in the mother. Do you remember a time, earlier stages, that you voiced this to anybody, or particularly in like your GP or any checkups that you were having, or even when Layla was little and you're just inquiring about Kiarah, was there any time that you felt like you voiced it and it was heard or listened to?
Yes, absolutely. So, okay, so I'll go back a bit. After the birth, right, the midwife looked at our placenta, or my placenta, for example, and she actually made a comment that stuck with me to this day. And it was, "Oh, that's interesting." And I said, "Pardon me, what's that?" And she goes, "Oh, your placenta is in really, really poor condition. Like, we normally only see these placentas in smokers or in overweight mothers." And I
Mm.
thought, and she's like, "And obviously, you're neither of those." And I was like, "No, of course not. Like, I've never smoked, and I'm not overweight or anything." And
No.
I thought that was particularly odd that the placenta had been in such poor condition, and that was like the connection as to perhaps why she arrived early,
Yes,
because the
makes sense.
placenta had stopped providing her the nutrients she needed, and she basically had no choice but to come out.
Yeah, to come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so that was basically the first point of when I first thought, that's interesting. No, that's not the normal. But then I would go to checkups with the girls, and it wasn't until I started noticing that Kiarah couldn't, for example, hold her arms up above her head. She couldn't extend them above her head. They'd only
Hmm.
go so far and they'd stop. And a family friend at the time also pointed out that she seemed to have a little bit of a crooked back, which I'd never noticed.
Mm.
Or she'd say, "Oh, are her eyes okay?" Because she was actually training to be a nurse. And it was these little pointers that sort of got me to mention it to the Plunkett nurse, or, our well child provider at the time.
Hmm.
And they would take her measurements and things, and they'd say, "Oh no, she's developing fine. She's in the 50th percentile of this and that." And the GP even says to me, "Oh no, she'll grow out of that." Like, without being able to hold her arms above her head. It was almost like he thought it was a developmental thing. And he said, "Oh no, she'll grow, and she'll grow out of this problem. It's all
Mm.
just to do with her development." And he never once thought, maybe there's more to it than that. But as a mum, intuitively, I knew in my gut that actually this isn't normal. There's more to this child than what they're telling me.
Mm.
Um, and I just knew. And like a dog with a bone, I would push back, and I'd keep going, and I'd keep mentioning these things until it got to the point where I would say, "No, I want a referral. I need someone to look into my child. I'm having all these issues, that I'm experiencing." And I basically only got to the point of, before her diagnosis, the only reason I got a referral was because I had to make up problems about her behavior, of all things, even though
Yes, I
she was
remember.
an amazing
Yeah.
child. But I had to say, "Actually, we're having these behavioral difficulties." And it wasn't until I had to keep pushing about that they referred me. And that was when we hit the jackpot when it came to finding a pediatrician who actually knew what she was looking at, basically.
And how old is she at this point?
So Kiarah was 6 years old
Yeah.
when we finally saw a pediatrician I had noticed issues from her from the age of 3.
Yeah.
And actually, I think even at age 4, she got a trigger thumb. So her little thumb wouldn't stick up like a thumbs up
Mm-hmm.
on one of her hands. And we went through orthopedics for that, and they did surgery and they corrected it. And that was the first surgery she ever had, apart from her teeth, and her teeth were in really poor condition. And it wasn't like I was being a bad mum. She only ever drank water. She didn't have lollies. She didn't have sweets. So I couldn't understand. We brushed her teeth twice a day, but it
Mm-hmm.
was like her teeth kept getting cavities and things like that. So there were like little nuggets along the way that led me to knowing that there was more to this picture, because your average 3-year-old doesn't get a trigger thumb.
Mm. Yeah.
Eh? Yeah.
Wow.
So she had to get blood tests when the pediatrician saw her, and the phenomenal thing is the reason why that pediatrician picked up on something about her was because another child in Palmerston North, in little Palmerston North, New Zealand, happened to have had the same diagnosis as her, I think in the year prior, but he was more severe.
Mm.
So it's like she took one look at her, she assessed all of the things that I had mentioned, and she pieced 2 and 2 together, and she thought, hey, this looks like you need genetic testing done. And that's when we went down the road of, the genetic testing stuff. And
Yeah.
it took a couple of months before that came back, because it had to get sent off to Australia. And then, we got the results in the new year of 2019.
Yeah. I remember it clearly. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. And at that point, yeah, your life changed forever, basically, didn't it?
did, yes. The trajectory went completely opposite to what I could have ever imagined.
It's interesting. I mean, you can share exactly what that is in a minute, but um, because we were all together for Christmas, so around that time you had the test, and so you're waiting on results, and at Christmas time we were all kind of talking about it, and obviously they had to give you a range of what it possibly could be, and we're all, I guess, you're in such denial that you think, oh well, it won't be you know, that other end of the spectrum. It'll just be something. Just,
Yeah,
it'll be something that we can work with, and it'll be all okay, because
yeah,
there was no other option in our mind. And I just remember um, after Christmas, and we were driving back to Hamilton, and Daniel called, and oh, it was just like the floodgates open, because it's just the reality hit. So it's
yeah.
just, you just know the levity of what this is. And then so do go and share what was the diagnosis, and that new trajectory for you guys.
Okay, so I was only 6 months into having just lost my mum to cancer.
Mm,
So
yeah.
I was already in a veil of grief. Like
Hmm.
I think I was just in that space. I was not really, I was a bit numb, if that makes sense. I was just numb to
Yeah.
the world around me and what was actually happening. And it was like I it's almost like I was, oh, how do I describe it? It's like I was there, but I wasn't there, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, sort of out of body experience, I guess, at that time. So, I remember the pediatrician calling me actually shortly before she asked us to come and see her, because she said, "Hey, I've got some results back, and I need you both to come in to see me to discuss it." And at that point, I knew that it was serious. So it wasn't something that you could just tell me over the phone, everything's going to be okay. it was like, I need to see you face to face, and yeah, I've got news to share. So we were just sort of prepping ourselves for that meeting, and I just remember like praying to my mum, like, please don't let it be anything serious. I can't handle this if it's life threatening, you know. I was just like, anything but it being life threatening. And then when we went into that meeting that day, the pediatrician told us, yes, we've got, you know, she's like, the good news is we've got a diagnosis, and you know, some families can go forever without having a diagnosis, so we can confirm that she has a diagnosis. And I thought, oh, this is a relief. I was right, you know, there is something that's going on. It wasn't just in my head. And she said, but the bad news is it's called mucolipidosis. It's ultra rare. It's a genetic disease, and it's degenerative. And it took a second for that penny to drop, because I said, oh, okay. I made some offhand comment like, oh, okay, well, hopefully it's, you know, it's something that can be cured. And then she said, no, there is no cure. And that's when Dan just broke down next to me. He was completely shattered. It was soul destroying. I was so numb to my own pain that I had no emotion. I had nothing to show in that moment. I just sat there, and it was just like, okay, tell us more, you know, tell me more about this. And she basically just handed me a couple of sheets of a paper printed off Google about mucolipidosis. And she said, it's so rare. It affects, you know, 1 in 400,000 people. There's only one other family in New Zealand that has it. Actually, at the time, there were 2, but we only knew of one. And because of the privacy thing, we didn't even know about the people in Palmerston North. We only knew of the family that had mucolipidosis in this country, and they were in their mid-30s. So there were 2 affected people in New Zealand that we knew of in that time in their mid-30s, and that they were the only ones in this country that had it. So we were just shell-shocked. We were like, oh my gosh, our world is destroyed. And it was hard because I'm pretty sure we had Kiarah with us at that time in that meeting. I'm pretty sure we did. I can't recall. I can't recall if we had the kids or not. I don't know. I can't. I've had so many. But yeah, it was hard because I remember having to show a brave face and be strong and just be like, okay, I'll you know, my child's not going to I'm not going to let her see me upset. She's already been through too much, you know. And you know, she saw me so broken when I had to say goodbye to my mum and things. So yeah, so I guess I had reinforced myself with this internal armor, and I put on a brave face, and I was like, right, I'm going to learn everything I can about this disease. I'm going to be an expert. And sure enough, that's exactly what tends to happen. You know, if your child has a diagnosis, you research it, you do everything you can.
You do.
And it was amazing because only a couple of months later, we had all these medical terms. We knew more than doctors in some situations. And yeah, it's just crazy how things developed from there. But yeah, we've had some pretty miraculous happenings during that time that I can only say were sort of guided from above, because only a month after that diagnosis, there was an international conference held in Auckland in New Zealand for this particular rare disease. And that at the time had only happened once every 2 or 3 years around the world. And it was the first time in New Zealand that they had it.
Amazing.
So yeah, amazing. So we actually, you know, got in touch with that family that we knew of. They took us under their wing, welcomed us with open arms, and we met them, a month later, and we basically formed a new family with our ultra rare disease group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So, sorry, I did allude to what it actually is. So, mucolipidosis, we call it ML for short because it is a mouthful. We say, our little saying in our group is, hard to say but harder to live with. So we just call it ML. But it's a lysosomal storage disease. And basically, it means that there's an enzyme missing. It's missing a tag in Kiarah's body that tells it how to be able to recycle broken down cell material. And so when it's missing the tag that tells it how to recycle, the broken down material in the cell, it causes storage to build up. And the toxins aren't removed from the cells, so they slowly break down the body. So particularly the bone, and it affects the whole metabolic system.
Yeah.
So that's everything. The heart, the brain, it's metabolic. So basically it's like your body cannot flush out the toxins, and so it accumulates. Yeah. So that's basically what it is. Yeah.
That's huge.
And I guess, it's Dan and I are carriers. So we're carriers of a mutation, and we have a 1 in a 4 chance of a pregnancy resulting in the disease. So 25% chance with every pregnancy. And you wouldn't know you were a carrier unless you were tested.
Oh, what are the chances?
Yeah.
Yeah.
1 in 400,000 apparently.
And for whatever reason, you two found each other. There's always reasons.
That's crazy, eh?
Yeah, it is. And so, but you knew with Layla, you knew, but you didn't know. Or did you have to do testing for her as well for whether she's?
No, so she did not present with the symptoms. So she has been presumed to be unaffected or a carrier, but in New Zealand they won't let us test the sibling unless they are presenting with symptoms, because they say they have to be 18 years or over to make that decision for genetic testing here, which is strange. It never used to always be like that. I know our good friends in Tauranga, the Nobles, they've got 3 children as well, and they were able to test their middle child, and I believe, did he get tested? But I'm pretty sure he came back non-affected. So, but they changed the rules, over the years. Yeah.
And they had 2 children that were affected, and then the one that wasn't. That's right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which then led you on to have our little Harlan. Tell us about that journey.
Yeah. So, being told that 1 in 4 pregnancies could result in mucolipidosis was enough for us to say no more. We would never risk bringing another child into the world with such a dreadful disease. It's a monster. It takes away their quality of life with each day that passes, basically. So we pretty much made a firm decision in that, but it was sad because I had always envisioned, and we both did actually, we had always envisioned more children, 3 or 4, but particularly for Dan, I think he would have had, not that you can't choose what you have, right? But he would have loved to have had a little boy one day, if that was what we would be blessed with. But we would have only tried, 3 or 4 times. That would have been it. But after that diagnosis, it was like all of our dreams were shattered. It was like so much of what we had hoped and dreamt for our future was snatched away with that diagnosis. But again, amazingly, we got referred to genetic counselors, which led to conversations about technology that we had access to, and it was offered to us that we would qualify for basically a free round of IVF, and that we would be able to screen out the disease if we went through the process. And it was just basically an opportunity handed to us if we wanted to take it. And we thought, actually, you know what? This could be our last chance at taking control of a future that we had always hoped and dreamed of, you know?
Mm.
So we did. We went through an IVF process, which was honestly one of the most excruciating experiences I've ever had in my life. So, you know, I take my hat off to all the women out there that have had to go through egg retrieval and IVF, and especially the ones that go through multiple rounds. Like, I just honestly, I could have never have done it more than once. It was unreal. So we went through that process successfully, and I actually out of our egg retrieval and all that, we ended up with 7 embryos that we put on ice. It was almost like, okay, we've got 7 embryos, but we put them on ice and left them for a year to just chill. Um, but actually, that was around the time of the COVID thingy happening, 2020. So the world was in a bit of turmoil. Yeah.
Yeah, it was COVID, but it was also leading into Kiara's huge surgery, because prior to that she'd had quite a few surgeries already, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think she'd already had 8 general anesthetics. Oh no, 7 by then, but she'd had 2 or 3 major surgeries. But this was going to be the biggest one. Yeah. And that was a decompression of her spinal cord because the storage had built up within it, and it was causing her spinal cord fluid to basically disappear up by her brain
Mm.
and her neck. So there was a blockage that they needed to drain, and then they needed to fuse her neck in place to basically have made room for her spinal cord to re-expand and like not get into that situation again.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a huge surgery that was coming up, and that was in 2021.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. Yeah, beginning of 21. Yeah.
And it was also because I remember the surgery, or one of the her previous big one, when she had the heart surgery.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I remember we were up there and they afterwards, and she wasn't coming round. Remember, she's very
Yeah,
floppy for a
that's
while,
right.
and
Yeah.
that's when they realized that the anesthetic works differently for these children.
Yes.
And they'd given her far too much. Is that right?
Yeah,
Um,
so yeah, she's ultra sensitive to certain drugs. Um, some of which don't actually have, or as they get older, they stop having an effect, like
mm,
some pain relief and things. But she's very sensitive to medication, and her airways are prone to collapsing. So they have really floppy airways, especially when they're put under anesthetic. So it is a high risk every time they go under anesthetic. And some of these children get to the point where they can no longer be under anesthetic. And that would rule out any further surgeries for them because they just cannot be put under again.
yeah.
Yeah.
Which is another reason that this the spinal compression surgery was so massive, because they had to get the anesthetic right, and it was a highly stressful time with the world's upside down with the whole COVID everything going on.
Yeah,
And
that's
so
right.
it was yeah, a really intense time. So yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about that time? Because I think that was the point where it went beyond, just family knowing, understanding what was happening for you guys, because they realize, a lot of people realized that, well, this is really serious. And it was that whole, you know, the risks are so incredibly high. But in that there was some real beauty and heartfelt, heartwarming things that happened with people rallying around and supporting you guys where, looking after your animals back at home and your house and doing the gardens. And because also you got trapped up in Auckland because of COVID as well, wasn't it? You couldn't
That's
leave.
right.
Gosh.
Yeah, it was a very intense time. But like you say, having had a network of support wrapped around us through is really what got us through those dark days. Because even though we were only up there for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, it honestly felt like an eternity.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it was because Kiara wasn't recovering as well as she was expected to. So nothing is really textbook with these kids, that it's such a rare disease that there's not a lot known out there. So often you have to become their strongest advocate, and you actually know more than anyone else does about your child and how they react to things and what goes on with them with this particular disease. There is only, now, what are we, 2024? So since then, we've got 5 other families in New Zealand that have had this diagnosis, but only 4 have children still living with us. So still, there's only 4 of us in this whole country that have a child with mucolipidosis. But all of our experiences are slightly different because this disease affects the children in a unique way. So they're not all the same. They have similarities, but things will affect them differently. And with ML, there's like a spectrum, and it goes from like ML1 right through to ML4. And Kiara sits in the middle between ML2 and ML3. So she's diagnosed with ML type 2, 3. And the type 2 is more severe. So that end of the scale is more severe. And the 3 to 4 is a little bit less. But 4 is actually a totally different, it's got a different name. It's not called mucolipidosis. So we'll just focus on the ML2, 3 for now. Same with ML1, that's a different name as well. But anyway, so yeah, it's such a unique journey that you are the expert. And it's a lot of trial and error. And when it's an error, it can go bad, real bad. So you just, as a mum, you don't want to leave any stone unturned because you feel like it's your duty to like ensure your child survives whatever it is that they're going to be going through. Yeah. So that was a really tough time, that major surgery on her spine. And it was terrifying. And thankfully we got through it. And things were okay after that for a short time. And that's when Harlan entered the picture.
Oh, actually, for a short time, you've blocked this out because it's so traumatic. But do you remember? There's just this little thing that happened. Because you two were, you're being nice about it, but you were both shattered afterwards. You were emotionally, physically, spiritually, you were mentally, everything drained. You're just, and because Kiara had been traumatized too from the amount of needle prodding, and she just wanted to go home. And because of that COVID time, you weren't allowed visitors, so we weren't allowed up there at that point to support you in the way that would have been nice. So it was tricky. So when you got home, you're both exhausted, and then you've got your daughter who still needs round the clock care. But she's happy to be home at least. So, I mean, you haven't slept for probably 3 weeks at this point.
Yeah.
And the good thing with you and Daniel is that you're both very in there and proactive, and you're just, trying to, you're so good at your research and advocating and asking questions, and it's a good team thing going on there. But when you're shattered, you're both giving each other permission to do the things that you needed to do to have a bit of reprieve. And so Daniel went to his happy place to do what he needed to do to give himself a bit of breathing space and uh, trying to process. Do you want to tell everybody what that was and then what happened?
Yeah, so okay, well, oh
We-
yeah, I didn't quite block that out, but no,
I
just
know. I just know how horrific it was for you.
yeah, yeah. So we'd only been home maybe 2 or 3 weeks. Kiara was in a neck brace. She managed to not be in a wheelchair by then, so that was good. But yeah, she was in a neck brace, and we had just sort of settled back into being home again, which was amazing. And Dan was excited about being able to get back on his mountain bike and, do the things that he needs to fill his cup. And so, yeah, he went out one afternoon on a sunny weekend day and with a friend. And I just thought, oh, well, he'll be back before dinner, so that's fine. But then I got a phone call maybe a few hours later in that afternoon from his buddy who he went along with. And his mate called and said, look, Dan's been in an accident. He's had an accident. It's really bad. And I've got a helicopter is on its way to come and get him. He's going to hospital. So at first, I just was numb. I just thought, what? Like, is this a joke? Is this some sort of sick joke that you're playing? Because it's not funny.
Mm.
But it wasn't a joke. Um, and I had to, luckily I had people rallying around that I could drop um, the kids off to whilst I raced to the hospital and meet the helicopter there. And I didn't know in what state Daniel would arrive in. I didn't even know if he was going to be alive. It was terrifying. It was honestly such a traumatic time of our life, that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I just didn't know what to expect. I just couldn't even fathom the possibility that it was going to be worst case. It didn't even, I couldn't allow myself to have that go through my mind at that time, having been through what we'd just gone through. It was too hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, intense.
But when he got to the hospital, he was alive, thank goodness. And in his they I think they pumped him up full of drugs and morphine and things. He was in a bit of a state, but he still managed to tell them, something along the lines of, please don't tell my wife, she's going to be so unhappy with me. Because yeah, it was just a mistake he'd made on the mountain bike track, and unfortunately, obviously ended up really hurt. So yeah, but that was the last thing. I wasn't angry. That would have been the last thing on my mind. I was just relieved he was okay-ish.
Mm. Yeah.
But yeah, so that ended up being, he was in hospital for a few days, until he basically had to learn to walk again to get out of the ward. And he was stuck in a ward full of like the elderly, because they, people that had broken their hips and things. That's where Dan ended up. Um,
Mm.
and it just wasn't the place to be. He had had enough of hospitals. It was like our second home already. He did everything he could to push through and get out of that ward. Um, so I ended up with, a child with a neck brace, a husband in a wheelchair, uh, and they both needed a lot of recovery time.
And you've also got another little one at home, Layla, who
Yeah,
somehow in amongst it all needed her needs met as well. So pretty
yeah,
huge.
that was full on. But
Yeah.
you'll soon hear that, that's sort of the theme of our life. We don't do things by halves. So yeah. And it's crazy to think back now, but after a couple of months of Dan trying to recover, that's when we decided, look, let's transfer Harlan, because we didn't know it was going to be Harlan, but we thought, you know what, we need some positivity in our life. We need something to look forward to. We need a ray of sunshine. Let's do this transfer process now, through IVF.
Mm-hmm.
And it couldn't have come at a better time, really, because, the way it all worked out, he was an absolute blessing. And it was that happy time in our life that we could look forward to.
Yeah.
Until the next episode came along. So don't know if you want me to chat about that.
You'll write a book one day, Nadia.
I could, I really could. I always
Yeah.
said, we could have a reality show. There would never be a dull moment, because there's always so much going on.
Yeah, it's kind of like for your family, it's what everyone else might have one tiny aspect of that in their lifetime. You guys have just been, it's just event after event after event. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Pretty crazy. But I guess the thing that keeps coming through is that you're strong and it's certainly not easy, but the two of you, it's that you're a team and you manage and muddle. And, I can imagine sometimes really, get so annoyed with each other. Because I know he's my brother, so that's okay. He's like, um, but you've got through that, together, and then drawing on your people around you, and the whole journey with Kiara. It's because Maya's the same age as Kiara. She's 9 months older, and I think that's where it's confronting for me, because you can see in the growth.
Yeah.
Maya's almost probably double her height, almost.
Yeah,
You
well,
just
little Layla is already surpassing her in height. People think I've got twins because
yeah,
they are the same height. They both have glasses. They look almost very similar. But it is hard for Kiara because, she's only the height of an 8-year-old.
yeah,
And all of her peers are all going through their growth spurts, and she's not. And yeah, it's a struggle. Even intellectually, we got told she's intellectually disabled. I mean, what does that mean for us? Well, Kiara is still Kiara. We have never let this diagnosis define who she is. She's an amazing little soul,
hmm
and all it means for us is that we just want to foster what brings out the best in her. We want her to live her best life possible. And if that means that we would do things unconventionally, then we will, and that's
yeah,
exactly sort of what we chose to do after her last major surgery just a few months ago, which ended up being a revision of that big surgery on the spinal cord. Yeah.
yeah. Which is a bitter pill to swallow, isn't it? Because you're hoping that one time was done, but it was more to go and to undo some of the things from that one. But
Yeah.
I guess when it's a rare condition like this, and there's only a handful of people in New Zealand that have it, there isn't any one person that specializes in it in New Zealand. And I think that where they get where it becomes a challenge is that she needs like a constant team around her of, okay, I've got neuro, I've got osteo, I've got heart, because they hold that information. She needs everyone talking to each other, the whole team talking to each other to say, no, 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 because that affects that. Whereas most people go in for a surgery and it's on one area, so you just need one specialist who
Hmm.
specializes in orthopedics or whatever it is. She needs a huge team, and there's just not the team isn't there. And it's not
Yeah.
because they're not performing, it's just that they just don't know. They just don't know. They haven't got the resources, they haven't got the research, they haven't got the experience, and so they're drawing on a international community, medical community, to try and understand what is happening and what it does to these children's bodies. But like you say, each person's unique, so it expresses slightly differently. And,
Yeah.
like, what is happening, if anything, Nadia? What is happening out there is there awareness for?
Yeah, so basically, we teamed up with the whānau in New Zealand, and we started to reach out and really connect globally with families who have children that suffer from ML.
Mhm.
And now we eventually we got connected with the other family in Palmerston North, and we're really close friends now, which is amazing. Um, and it is this tight knit community that we've built through with through ML. And there are families that have been in touch with each other for decades, but it's only recently now that this community is really drawing on each other's strengths and experiences and sharing what their kids are going through and what's worked for them or what hasn't really worked for them. And with this time that's passed, technology is really surpassing, all expectations in a lot of areas. And what ended up happening is that we a group of us that were advocates, really strong advocates for this disease, decided, hey, let's create our own international um, charity, and let's find a cure. Let's cure this, or find therapies for this disease, because there's none out there. And so I was, absolutely honoured and delighted to be invited to be on the board of directors for Cure Mucolipidosis. And we're going strong, I think 4 years now. And we're finally at a point where we decided that, we've looked through so many avenues. We've got research happening in lots of places. And but what was happening is that we discovered that a lot of these businesses, or the places that, fund scientists to research into these diseases, we were finding that none of them really wanted to research too much into email because it was so rare. It's not something they can make a lot of money from, the FDAs and all that. And so what ended up happening was we took the bull by the horns, basically, and said, look, how about we do our own research? How about we create our own cure? We get our own advisory board of scientists. How about we do it ourselves? That way we've got control over the process. And it made complete sense. And that's exactly what we've gone out and done. And we are, we're really pioneering through so much, so much research and things that it hasn't been done before. But we're at a point now where we've got a well-established group, and we've got a proper plan and everything, and we've got steps and milestones that we can reach and goals to achieve. So, yeah, it's really exciting to see the growth we've had as an organization since it got
Wow,
started. Yeah.
that is incredible. It just, uh, it just makes my heart happy. It's so inspiring, and the power of coming together in a little collective, um, for that cause. And you can move mountains. Like a mother on her own, like you on your own, advocating for Kiara, you will do anything to move that mountain. But it's so much easier when you've got other people who understand the mountain there with
Yes,
you, like,
totally.
doing
Yeah.
that work.
Yeah.
And
And
yeah, is there, so basically you get no funding, there's no external support, it's all on your own, pretty much. Is
correct.
that
I mean,
correct?
we apply for grants. We apply for grants here, there, and everywhere to try and support us to get this research happening. We, I mean, we know that it's going to take gene therapy. So throughout all the other options, that's the one thing that could really work for us.
Mhm.
And yeah, so we apply for grants. we haven't been too successful in that at this stage. So what do? We have to fundraise. That's
Yeah.
really, that's going to give us the best hope in terms of pushing forward and making progress with the research that's going on with our scientists and things. Yeah.
Is that based in the United States?
Yeah, yep. So we've got a scientist, and she's actually created gene therapy before. It's not like it hasn't been done. It just needs to basically be specialized to this disease. So it's just,
Yeah.
we go through the same process that we have to for all therapies to be approved, and it needs to obviously go to clinical trials and things. So we've got a plan, and a roadmap to get there. So we've got people scattered all around the globe, and it will take a global effort to reach the milestones that we need to.
Yeah.
But the first initial one would be, yeah, it's a huge task to undertake, but we do need to raise 2 million US dollars. But that will actually get us to basically get clinical trials on these kids to help cure them. Yeah.
Wow. Because we're talking about how many kids globally? Like it's actually not that many, right?
No, we've got a registry, so we've got an international registry, and I don't even think the numbers are at 200.
Wow.
Yeah. So
S-
it's hard because it is so rare that you don't get a lot of interest from, those big groups, the big farmers. They don't want
Yeah.
to know about it.
No,
Um,
no money. No money
Farm
there.
Act in New Zealand, they don't want to know about it. Rare diseases are really the bottom of the barrel for these big companies. So yeah, that's why we're just so determined to persevere, and we'll get it done. It can happen.
Yeah.
We'll do it ourselves.
Yeah. And I love this. And you will. Well, not just you will, we will. Like it
Yeah.
takes this and I just love that that drive and passion and desire that you have because it's fueling you and it's a mother's love. It's that mother's,
Yeah.
you'll do whatever and it's fueling this and making it happen. So but what can we do? Like is there something, with this fundraising, what does that look like?
Well, because no one's heard of this, no one knows about it. It's not something that anyone would have ever heard of. So what we're really trying to do is raise awareness. We want to say, hey, our daughter suffers from this rare disease. It's called ML. Um, share it around. We do a thing called Rare Disease Day, sorry, every year on like February the 29th. And that's to show your colours for Rare Disease Day. So that's just to acknowledge all the different rare diseases there are in the world. There's heaps, but in terms of for Kiara, what Kiara suffers from personally, ML, we've just dropped a major fundraiser. So we've just launched that, and it's called 10,000 for 10. So in order to raise our 2 million US dollars, in a nutshell, it just means that if 10,000 families could commit to $10 a month for 20 months, we would hit that milestone and we would get that done. Um, and anyone can donate, and you don't have to commit to the $10 a month for 20 months. If you wanted to make just any donation, you can on our website.
Yeah.
So that website is www.curemucolipidosis.org.
Great.
Um, and
And
mucolipidosis is a hard thing to spell, so I can spell it out.
I'll add it to the show notes,
Oh,
Nadia.
okay. Cool.
So yeah, if you're listening and this it feels like it's something that you might like to contribute to or support, yeah, there's a couple of hundred families around the world that would be ever so grateful, and there's one right here that would be super
Yeah.
grateful because as an auntie watching her little niece go through. She's such a strong, beautiful, vibrant, happy little girl, but at the same time, she just wants other people to be happy. So she masks her discomfort and pain. I noticed it
Hmm.
even more when we're down there. You can see it each time, but this time when we saw you at Christmas, she's not. She knows what she can't do, so she'll hold back from what some of the other kids are doing, and sh there's a an acceptance of it, but it's like such a feeling of this is so unfair. Like she
Yeah,
should be able to be out there doing what they're doing, and um, you know, even just watching her because her fingers are they
they're
what do you
clawing. Yeah,
yeah,
they
the
they
claws.
claw.
Yeah, so even eating, like she just tries to make it look like it's not a big deal, but you just think no child should have to go through this, and it's just
Yeah, especially since her neck has been fused even further down, so it's robotic. She can't turn her neck anymore. She lost I think it was 90% of her neck movement, and
Mm.
to watch her have to adjust to that, and it was a huge adjustment and it was really hard for her. But what could she do about it? So
No,
she did accept it in the end, but it's heartbreaking as a mum to see your child have to go through that, and there's nothing you can do to take that pain away.
there's nothing you can do. And also watching her watch her sister, who's like you're saying is now
Mhm.
passing her in most, probably all areas. Um,
Yeah.
that for her is super confronting. I can see that is probably one of her biggest challenges right now,
Oh,
knowing that, which puts pressure on their relationship as well. And then you having to manage, I can just imagine on a daily, the um
that dynamic. Yeah. I mean,
yes.
you're an older sister, Maria. Could you imagine being sat down at your school photos and having your little sister be mistaken for the big sister?
Yeah,
And the photographer is saying to your little sister, "Oh, here, big sister, come stand up here." And that's exactly what she had to go through at her school photos last year. She had to
yeah,
pretend, I just watched her, she didn't say a thing. She pretended that she was the little sister and
yeah,
Layla was the big sister.
yeah, yeah. So not only physically is she just is we can see her body's deteriorating, but her little soul, it
Yeah,
takes its toll. And I just, you know, let's get this money that you need. It doesn't sound
yeah,
like a lot though, does it? 10 for 10,000 or however you it's
yeah, yeah.
worldwide,
10,000
surely we can get that going.
If we
So
just had 10,000 people out of the whole entire world, like, we'd have that first initial therapy made. And because the important thing is it is a race against time. So when I say it's a cure, it is a cure, but they can only really cure what the child, like, they can only really maintain what the child has. It can't bring back abilities. It
mm,
can only stop things from getting worse.
yeah, yeah,
So we can halt it in its tracks and she could live a full life, you know. But
mm,
the more that time goes on and the more that she deteriorates, we lose that stuff forever.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, it's oh all I can say, Nadia, is that you're amazing. The family's amazing, and I'm just so grateful you've got good support, um, not just locally but globally. I'm glad that you're able to put your energy into this group so you feel like, okay, I'm doing something and making progress. And I think the more conversations you have, like you're saying, it's just that awareness,
Yeah.
just, just awareness and people learning about, I mean, you guys have been through so much that you just, it's kind of like, oh yeah, well, you don't even really talk about it anymore. But for anybody else, it's like, my child just fell off their bike and scraped their knee, and that's the end of the world. And it is for them because it's the first time the child's hurt themselves, but
Mm.
they've got, and then I watch you two and you're like, yeah, yeah, my child is alive and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah,
It's,
I know what you're saying. I mean, to be honest, we were those parents. We didn't know. We wouldn't have had a clue about these rare diseases. And to be honest, back when Kiara was first diagnosed with a visual impairment at age 4, I thought that was the end of the world.
yeah,
I couldn't accept the fact that something was wrong with her eyes. I was like, no way, not my child. My child can't have glasses. And it honestly was the end of the world for me back then.
mm,
Um, so I could never invalidate someone else's experience. But I know that obviously with our experiences, and these listeners actually haven't really even heard the half of it, but it has put a lot in perspective for us. It's put so much in perspective for us, and that's just a lesson that we've had to learn in this lifetime.
Yeah, and I think that's credit to both of you, because you're very gracious about it, and you're very accepting and of everybody else's experience, regardless of what it is. There's no like woe is me. And there's times when I can imagine you'd be feeling like, what the hell, like what is
Mm.
this, and you dance in and out of all the emotions. But Nadia, before you do go and see your beautiful children, could you please just tell us something that you do to keep your soul full, and amongst everything that you have to do and go through, what's soul filling for you?
Yeah, so the biggest thing for me would be to have time alone to recharge and just really reground myself without, the noise of the responsibility that comes with being mum, being the wife, being, all the things. Um, that's really what fills my soul, to be able to just have some time out and just do the things that, make me feel like me again. And whether that's catching up on a book, or, watching a series on Netflix, or catching a movie, or a coffee date with friends, even if I felt like I've been missing a connection with people, because that's often what happens. We get so busy, we forget to be us again. So that would probably be, the biggest thing for me to fill my cup, is just to have that time and that chance to regroup and just not have those responsibilities, and just do what I need to, just to feel like me again, without the pressure. And I mean, there's always added pressure that if, you've got time to yourself, you can catch up on all the chores and, all the things that need doing around the house while the kids aren't there. And yes, that can be good as well. That can sometimes be what you need. But I feel like it's really important to not have that pressure that you're expected to have done that. Um, so yeah, kind of like a no strings attached. Hey, for hubby to be like, hey, I'll take the kids, or, Nana might have them for the day, or something like that. Or friends might, drop around and be like, hey, would the kids like a play date? That stuff is amazing, because without it, you really do lose your sense of self, and your soul just gets tired and drained. And yeah, I think it's really important to take care of number one, that's for sure.
Absolutely. 100% agree with that, Nadia. Well done. And sometimes it's easier said than done, I know,
Yeah.
but it's the first step is knowing that. And then for us mamas to get a bit braver and actually voicing it and asking for that help. Hey, and saying, this is what I
Yeah.
need. Yeah, because
Yeah.
all our dear partners, as much as we love them, they don't always pick up what we're putting down. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's it. It's almost like there needs to be some exchange of like, well, I'll do this for you if you do this for me. But sometimes it's just like, you know what? Just let me just do something for me. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I get it. Cool. Thank you. And many, many of those opportunities I wish for you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time, Nadia. This is, I think it's just one of many conversations. This is a little overview, little snippet. Like
Yeah.
Nadia said, there's a lot more in there as well. But this one is just to meet you and hear your story, and raise a little bit of awareness for mucolipidosis, even though I'm getting my tongue
Email.
twisted around it.
Yeah. Thanks
I
so
just
much, Mara.
No, you're so welcome. And yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to do this.
Yeah. If anyone
Okay.
wants to personally follow our particular story, they can jump on Facebook and go to Kia's ML3 Journey page. If they want to, learn more about us as a whānau. But otherwise,
Yeah.
there's a lot more out there than there was when we first learned about it. That's all I know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's partly due to you and your contributions as well. But anyway, thanks so much, Nadia.
All right. Thanks, Ma. Namahe.
Wow. I did tell you it was going to be a big one, didn't I? Yeah, it's a big story, and the reason it's hard, one of the reasons it's hard is because there's not really light at the end of the tunnel. They're just constantly just they're treading water and trying to keep head above water with this disease, and it's quite brutal. Like Nadia did say, a monster that takes away the child's quality of life by the day. So it really is like a race against time for them, working with trying to find a cure. But there are lots of takeaways in here, and I think you can gather yours yourself. But the biggest one I just want to share, or two really. Firstly, is that mother's intuition, because Nadia knew from early days, and it took a lot of her persistence and constant asking and questioning, and finally something was done. But it took not just weeks or months, this was years. It took years for anything to that support to come in. And it's not anyone's fault, really. It's just such a rare disease that nobody knows much about it, especially in little old New Zealand. So, but due to her intuition and her determination, it's that mama bear, right? Once that's activated, you're going to move mountains, or you're going to try to anyway. And we did talk about this, and this, the second thing is the importance of having support, that community, that village, and as we've discovered, their support, their community is not really local; it's actually global, because there's less than 200 people worldwide that have this disease. So they have a global community of support that they're trying to really get momentum going and bring awareness, and together they are really driven to meet that goal of they want to find a cure. And they do now have that light, because it's been shared that with gene therapy they probably can get somewhere at least. So to do that, they, as with everything, they need a bit of financial help. So if you want to donate, please you can donate an amount, or you can join the 10,000 for 10. So they're trying to find 10,000 families worldwide that will donate $10 a month for 20 months, and that will bring them to their goal of $2 million, which will help pay for the research to get this underway. And like Nadia has shared, it is a race against time, because every day these children deteriorate, and I can see that before my very eyes, looking at my beautiful little niece. So she's so courageous, and they are incredibly courageous, and I just love them so much, and they're just been through a lot and are going through a lot. And yeah, this is my way of on this Valentine's Day, the day of love, it's giving back to them and trying to share that love. So please do share this episode with anyone, really. Anybody. And yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time to listen. Sometimes not easy listening to these big things, but they are out there, and people do live with and have to manage big things day in, day out, and you wouldn't even know. And looking at Ding or Nadia, most of the time you wouldn't know. Yeah, they're pretty special people, and the most special of all is my little beautiful niece Kiarah. So thank you for listening, and have a beautiful, soul-filling day.